அடுத்ததாக பிரதம பேச்சாளரின் உரை. பிரதம பேச்சாளராக கலந்து கொண்டிருப்பவர் திருவாளர் ரிச்சர்ட் மேன் அவர்கள். இவர் தற்போது கால்டன் பல்கலைக்கழகத்தின் கலை மற்றும் சமூகவியல் பீடத்தின் துணைவேந்தராக பணியாற்றுகின்றார். இவர் தமிழ் கடவுள் முருகன் பற்றியும் முருக வழிபாடு பற்றியும் முருகன் எவ்வாறு ஸ்கந்தனாகவும் கார்த்திகேயனாகவும் வட இந்தியாவில் முருக வழிபாடை பரவியதை பற்றியும் தனது பல்கலைக்கழக ஆராய்ச்சியை மேற்கொண்டுள்ளார்.
Cette année, notre conférencier principal est le professeur Richard Mann. Il est professeur associé et doyen associé à la faculté des arts et des sciences sociales de l'université Carleton. Ses recherches portent sur l'hindouisme ancien et médiéval, le développement historique du shiavisme et la religion et la vie publique. Il a fait plusieurs contributions à des publications liées à des recherches. Récemment, il a présenté un essai intitulé « Débat sur le génocide en tant que définition. Comment l'État manipule les termes et les histoires pour perpétuer les génocides ». L'essai a été présenté à la deuxième conférence internationale sur la nationale tamoule et le génocide au Sri Lanka qui s'est déroulé à l'université Carleton à Ottawa en mai 2018. Cet essai affirme que le gouvernement sri-lankais a défini les Tamouls comme les terroristes et des séparatistes et antinationales, dans le but de déguiser la violence de l'État à l'encontre de la minorité tamoule au Sri Lanka en une action antiterroriste par l'opposition à la violence engendrée par l'État. Il a engagé à l'université Wilfrid Laurier, à l'université McMaster et au collège de William et Mary avant de rejoindre Carleton en 2006. Sans plus attendre, je souhaite la bienvenue à notre conférencier, le professeur Richard Mann.
First of all, just a little announcement. Due to the availability of guest schedules, we may call questions in the ceremonial order of precedence, so please accept our sincere apologies for that. Next, I would like to introduce Carleton Associate Dean Richard Mann, who is the keynote speaker for our event this year. He is the Associate Dean at the Faculty of Arts and Social Science at Carleton University. His research interests include early and medieval Hinduism, the historical development of Shaivism, and religion and public life. He has made several contributions to publications related to his research. Recently, he presented an essay titled Debates Over Genocide as a Definition: How the State Manipulates Terms and Histories to Perpetuate Genocide. The essay was presented at the Second International Conference on Tamil Nationhood and Genocide in Sri Lanka, which took place at Carleton University in Ottawa, May 2018. The essay argues that the Sri Lankan government constructed definitions of Tamil as terrorists, separatists, and anti-national in an attempt to disguise state violence against the Tamil minority community in Sri Lanka as anti-terrorists as opposed to state-generated violence. More details of the conference are available at www.tamilconferences.org. He has taught at Wilfrid Laurier University, McMaster University, and the College of William and Mary before joining Carleton University in 2006. Without further ado, I welcome our guest speaker, Associate Dean Richard Mann, to the stage.
Thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure. You're going to more or less see parts of the talk I gave at the conference. So debates over genocide is a definition, how the state manipulates terms and histories to perpetuate genocide. So this is from the Sydney Morning Herald. Let all those who aid and abet terror be warned. Let those who secretly or openly condone the path of violence pursued by the cowards of the LTTE be warned. The days of terror in this land are numbered, and that number is small. What I would like you to understand is that when the genocides were happening in Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan government shut down any foreign media from entering the country. So the only words you ever heard came from the Sri Lankan Sinhalese government. And that's what went out into the media in the Western world. So much of the Western world had no understanding of what was actually happening in Sri Lanka and assumed, particularly after 9/11, that when they saw the word terrorist, that people must be evil and put away. This is then one from the New York Times. Injured Sri Lankan leader urges Tamils to help end terrorism. The Tamil people must clearly and without hesitation decide whether they are going to continue to strengthen the hand of terror and murder by their secret, silent, or partial support of the LTTE. And then it goes on. Much of this can be easily described as something called media framing. Media framing can be easily defined as a theme is repeated again and again and again and again, to the point where if that theme ever gets changed, people start to question it. So much of what the Sri Lankan government tried to do was to frame Tamils as terrorists, and especially after 9/11, that's all you ever see in Western media. What you never ever hear is the voices of Sri Lankan Tamils and what was actually happening to them and their families in Sri Lanka at the time. And that then becomes the most devastating part for the community, because in the international scene they are presented as terrorists, but what is actually happening on the ground is never reported and never acknowledged. And then another one, Mr. Kadigamar was an idealist long before September 11 and the London bombings, long before terrorism became an anathema in the Western world. He spoke out against terrorism in Sri Lanka and abroad. And then again we have Mrs. Kumaratunga speaking. Again, part of this media framing is the only voice you ever hear is that voice of power and authority that goes out of its way to misrepresent what is actually happening in Sri Lanka, what is actually going on. And the international community only sees it one way, because after 9/11, that word terrorist carries its own particular mindset in people's minds. So the way Tamil Sri Lankans are presented through this framing has a real impact on the community, and then how they get perceived outside of Sri Lanka once many of them leave. So it's damaging. So on this night, she, Kumaratunga, tells the people that peace is at hand. And again, we get this presentation of a prime minister who says, oh, we're going to make everything okay. She presents herself as peaceful. We never actually find out what it is that her army is doing in Sri Lanka. So again, this is how the international community came to understand what was happening in Sri Lanka and why it is now so important that the Tamil community have its voice heard on a broader scale. These are images from Ramu Manivanam's book, Sri Lanka, Hiding the Elephant, documenting genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. I'm not sure how easily you can see them, but the caption reads, Nazi-style concentration camps. And in the next one, maybe the children will look down for a minute because it's pictures of dead children. So what you never see in the media are these pictures of killed Tamil children. How could a child be described as a terrorist worthy of destruction? How is that possible, is what I want you to, well, you already know the story and what happened. The international community and the media did not know this. We don't see these images in the press. And that's why we would like to see elements of this change. So again, going back to Professor Mani Vanam's text, if you want to read it, it's sitting in my office. You can loan it anytime you want. It's only 300 pages long. But it's an impactful read. So genocide and war crimes. What needs to happen is that governments need to understand what happened in Sri Lanka and to the Tamil community. In other words, the Tamil community's voice needs to be heard. So I'm very pleased that there are politicians here willing to hear this voice, that it is best described as a genocide, I think. So to call it a genocide, we could also call it war crimes according to the UN definitions, both of which are applicable. And what we need to begin to ask is, can the Canadian government and other governments start the process at the UN to do something more meaningful than what has happened, which has largely not been meaningful enough? That there is a role to be played by those in positions of power, first to circulate accurate knowledge about what actually happened in Sri Lanka, and then to bring that case to those with the authority to actually take meaningful action on the international stage, would be the argument I would like to make. The Sri Lankan government continues, though, to frame Tamils as terrorists, that nothing has actually changed on the Sri Lankan governmental side, so that these abuses of power continue, but we never really hear about them in the media, largely because, again, the Sri Lankan government controls much of its media. So when we do actually hear about what's happening in Sri Lanka, we never actually hear what is really going on in Sri Lanka. So what I would like to encourage you to do is to reach out to your politicians and encourage them to engage in conversations and discussion about what could be the next steps that the Canadian government could take to make a meaningful difference in the world, that crimes were committed by a nation state against a group of people, and that something needs to happen to, one, recognize this on the international scene, and also perhaps to demonstrate to the Sri Lankan government that not only do we recognize that what you did was terrible, but also that we are now going to do things to you as a way of, in effect, showing other governments that this is simply not going to be okay. That then brings me to my other project that I hope to undertake, which is to try to find better ways for academics to find out what are the stories of the Tamil community. So I've already begun part of this project with the Canadian Sikh community. So one way I have changed what I do when I lecture is when I went through my undergraduate at Wilfrid Laurier, I had no idea what happened in Sri Lanka. I had no idea what happened in the Punjab in 1984 and in Delhi in 1984. I had no idea that the Indian government pulled the police, sent out lists of names of Sikhs, and allowed people to go and kill them. And I had no idea what happened to the Tamil community in Sri Lanka. Now I do know, largely because those communities have reached out to me, and I now realize what has happened. So a great part of what I would like to start to do is to document some of that so it could be published. So I'm starting that project with the Sikh community, mostly because I was trained in things like Sanskrit, ancient literature. I like to wander around ancient temples and read the inscriptions and try to figure out the rhyme, rhythm, and meter to see if it matches the Rig Veda. I might be what's described by my students as a nerd. A proud nerd. Having said that, though, I'll have to do more research into how one does this sort of anthropological, sociological field research. There would be an ethics approval I would have to go through if I'm going to interview people. There has to be a process and forms that need to be filled out. It's probably going to be the case that I would need a Tamil speaker in the room with me when I do these. I'm sure Warren will volunteer. It's too late, Warren. Oh, did I say that out loud? Sorry. So part of that project would be going forward is to have your voice be heard. Another part of my project is more at Carleton. It turns out I'm the only lecturer who talks about the Sri Lankan genocide that I know of. So some of that is also reaching out to some of my colleagues in law and legal studies, history, political science. Why can't this be part of your course material as well? Because issues of genocide, what happened in World War II and other things come up in these courses. They could come up in these courses as well. You might start to get emails from the society saying Richard Mann would like some of you to come and speak to his class. So another part of it is, it's one thing when I get up in front of a class and tell them what happened in Sri Lanka. It's a whole other thing when someone from the community comes up and speaks. Yes, we'd have to go through the ethics process as well, but that's part of an ongoing project, that your voice needs to be heard. And it needs to be heard and understood by people out there. Oh, that's it. Thank you.